should go ahead and get
Cool.
started.
Okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Clint Langford with GSG, and I want to welcome you to this session of wall graphics with Avery Dennison. I'd like to just let you know we've got Grant and Molly here from Avery to answer any questions that you may have, as well as Wes from Harmonic Media and Chris at CL Visual. We also have Michelle here with GSG, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have, and we'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So if you look at your right-hand side, we've got a chat session going on there. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have, and we'll take it from there. Grant, if you'd like to pick that up.
Great. Sure. Thanks, Clint. As Clint was saying, we'd like this to be interactive, so please make sure you're using the session chat. We've got a lot of experts here that will be glad to answer your questions. Otherwise, we're going to be just doing talks, a nice talk about walls. After this, you can join me in the Avery Dennison booth. I'll be happy to answer any questions and connect with you via the booth chat. So take it away, Molly.
All right. Well, I'd like to get started by having Wes and Chris both introduce themselves and you know what they do, how they got started in this, and then we can get into how they do successful wall graphics. So Wes, why don't you start out?
Sure. I'm Wes. I'm the general manager and head of operations at Harmonic Media in Denver. Been doing this for 20 plus years now. Both on I started in screen printing and then moved into the digital world about 15 years ago. And have been on the production side of it along with in design and now running sales and front end operations stuff. So seen quite a bit. As far as wall stuff goes, just generally, it's a lot of on the initial prep side is where a lot of the stuff starts, and trying to be cognizant of what you're looking for at the beginning prior to even getting design going or anything like that. Site surveys are important, stuff like that down the road. I know Chris is going to have a lot of good insight as well on a lot of prep and stuff at the front end that needs to be done prior to. And just, experience and, trusting your gut when it comes to some things, but then also just knowledge and, leaning on the guys in the vendorship side of it for the manufacturing roles and where they're at. Grant is, a long acquaintance of mine, and we've worked together on quite a bit of stuff, and he's always been a good resource for me in that sense. And we've talked through lots of different projects. So that's a lot of where our success comes in, is just staying in touch with stuff like that and then just working through it together.
Okay. How about you, Chris? You want to tell us a little bit about you, your company, what you guys do?
Absolutely. I'm Chris. I'm at CL Visual in Long Island, New York. We are a wide format branding marketing company. We kind of do it all. We have a big focus on design here. I came from the offset industry. So I started in offset about 10, 12 years ago now, mainly in sales. And then I got into a little bit of the production, mostly in the small format digital end of it. I kind of got out of offset, went to the digital end. We had a couple aqueous printers, a couple solvent printers, but little stuff, mostly banners, little posters. And I just took a liking to the wide format. My old partner and I split up, and I went strictly into wide format. So here we are, way more wide format. We still design everything, but we're really a wide format based company. We started out here on Long Island, but we do have national reach. We do work all over the country. I'm sure I'll do a lot of work with a lot of you guys out here that are joining us, hopefully. And that's really it. That's where we're at. We continue to have the national reach. We enjoy working all over with everybody, and we have a good, strong footing with that.
Okay. So we're talking about wall graphics today, and Wes already mentioned a little bit about some of the expectations, and when somebody comes to you and says they want to do a wall graphic, what are some of the things that you talk to them about on setting those expectations, what they can expect, what they need to do ahead of time? Kind of take us through the process.
A lot of it for us, because we do a lot of tenant finish work and custom interior stuff, is where kind of our niche is when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So for us, on the front end, it's asking if the wall is existing, if it's not, prep time, finding out stages of construction and going through that point, setting the expectation of, we're the last step in the process. And then, the importance of a site survey to actually look at the finish of the wall, talking through primers, paints, and all those other things that come through. I'm almost positive we're going to talk about the nightmare that is low VOC paints that come in and stuff like that. So just, the more that we're in front of on a new build or rebuild in front of the GC or architects who are trying to spec those things up front. And then at the end, if it's an existing wall that's already been there, talking through what the finish is, how long ago the wall's been painted, when the last time it was been painted, damages, anything like that, and just trying to be as upfront at the beginning on what to expect from the opportunity of something possibly failing due to texture on a wall in some form or fashion, or if there's needs to be spot painting or cleaning up the wall, just letting them know ahead of time on what that's going to take and how long in between from the day that the last brush strokes done to the wall from when we can get in there, and just being upfront about all that stuff.
So we're pretty similar in that sense. We try to set expectations with whoever we're dealing with. But the first thing I usually try to do is find out if a wall wrap is the right choice for them. Sometimes it's not, many times it is, but we need to see what the best option is for them. We have some great clients out there, and I want to be able to bill them and, create revenue for my company and do the work. But I also want them getting the best possible fit product that they can get. So sometimes wall wrap isn't the right option, or not the right location, or the durability won't hold up, or there's other options. So setting expectations and really finding out what the client needs and what's going to be the best fit is our number one. And then from there, we'll go into the prep work, the paint type, when it was done, and all that. But that's really the starting point for us, is finding out what the best product is for them in there.
So do you guys have a checklist that you provide to customers, that they need to, back before low VOC paint, we used to say, 2 or 3 weeks, and they waited 3 days. Now we have low VOC paints, we say 3 months, and they still wait 3 days. What are some of those things that, how do you communicate that? Is it like in writing? Is it you go on site, have something that they sign off on? Like when we do car wraps, you've got that inspection form that typically you have somebody sign off on, that you saw damage here, or is there anything like that you guys do for walls?
We pretty much expect the worst, and we expect them to lie.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we treat
Fair
everything as if it was painted this morning. We treat everything
Okay.
as if we're walking into 40 degrees. We're just expecting the absolute worst, and we would take, assuming the worst, we take every precaution, assuming the worst.
Yeah, we
you can never go wrong in our eyes with that. So I think that's number one. Always assume the worst. Figure out the worst case scenario, and just assume you're walking into that. And then if it winds up being great and everything runs perfect, amazing, fantastic. But assuming the worst is usually where you're at, because chances are they're going to lie about it. If you say you need 2 weeks, they're like, cool, can you install it in 3 days? We're almost done spackling. It wasn't painted 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, we do the same thing. It's just that expectation on our end to go, it was probably painted yesterday. I mean, we get lied to by GCs all the time on, yeah, it was painted 2 weeks ago, like you requested. And we're like, I can smell the paint when I walked in here. It's not 2 weeks old, type of thing. But yeah, that expecting the worst is always honestly best case scenario. If you walk into something greater, it's awesome.
So Wes and Chris, we got a good question here from Clint. You may have answered this, but what do you tell your customers as a baseline? You have to wait this long after you paint before you can install the wall graphic. Is it 2 weeks?
Well,
I tell them 7 days. That's my kind of go-to. I think that's usually assuming that they have temperature regulation in there. So if they're going to have 68 to 72 degrees, and they do have fresh air, they do have an HVAC system that's flushing air through, 7 days is kind of ideal for me. Obviously, if you can wait longer, great, but that's the minimum that you want for the proper install that we feel comfortable actually warrantying. Now, that
Yeah.
obviously doesn't happen often, but that's what we do tell them, and that's what we put on paper.
Yeah, ours
So
is
as a-
10 days. So
Perfect.
it's the same thing. We always try to get from them in writing, whether it's email or signing off on the painters were in here, everything was done, this is your date, and then we start the clock. Anything outside of that is automatically, I'm not going to warranty it unless, you know, we've been there, we've seen, we've checked, and we're going to approve it on our end. But typically for us, it's a 10-day window and that's it.
So you guys have, let's say you've determined that wall graphics, wall wrap is the right thing for your customer. You've given them the specifications on paint, that it needs to wait for 7 days before that you can apply the film. How do you choose the film? You know, from an Avery Dennison standpoint, we've got our wall films, the 2611, which is a removable adhesive. Then we have 2610, and then we have high tack films, which are, as Grant calls it, the nuclear option, to make sure that, you know, it's going to stick, but it's never going to remove. You know, what's your next step on how you actually choose the film for the job?
We'll determine that
so,
up
I guess.
front on the timeline. If it's, you know, how long they're expecting to have it up. If it's a situation where it's a retail space and it's less than 3 months or 6-month window, then we'll choose one product over, you know, something else that we know that's going to be removable. If it's going into an office space where they're like, yep, this is our home office, and then the question comes up, is this going to be up for more than 3 years? And we just go from there. We had a situation where we had a retail location that was doing a remodel and they wanted to do a new permanent mural. And from notes from them on the remodel was, oh, the wall's not textured, it's going to be a smooth finish. And we get up there and it's the roughest textured wall I'd ever seen. And we stuck a film to it that was, it was recommended by a manufacturer for a textured wall, didn't stick. Had issues with it. You know, we did our SOP on it as far as putting silicone at the top edges to keep it from earring, and still didn't want to go. So part of that was, you know, not getting the specs on, you know, texture or not was going to be a huge determination on that. And then finally, Grant and I decided on using the 1106 as a, I'm coming back to Avery, I'm not trusting the other manufacturer product to do this. What do you recommend? And he was like, let's just go with the highest tack option. Just let them know up front, it's not coming down. If they're going to pull it, it's going to pull the drywall. And I was like, perfect. That's what I want, you know? And it was just one of those situations where we walked into, is this a permanent? Is it a not permanent? And then also the other question being, is it a textured wall or non-textured wall? And that's really the two options for us that are going to help determine what film we're going to use.
Okay. Chris, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, so we obviously have a pretty similar approach to that. I guess the first thing that I do when determining a film is where it's going and what they need out of it. So obviously permanent, removable, we got to think about that. I just assume, aside from short-term installs under 90 days, I will never, 6 months down the line, although I know that some films can come off clean and we have great success, and we actually have a lot of museums in New York we do events for that will only allow 2611 in there. It's a fantastic product for what we're doing. But realistically, if it's more than 3 months, I would never try to guarantee somebody a clean removal, whatever the case is. You don't know the conditions. You don't know if it's cold, if that acrylic's drying up, crystallizing, whatever it might be. But once we determine like durability, I guess that's number one. How durable does this need to be? How many people are touching it? Are they washing it? Is it staining? Is there anything that's going to splash against it? We'll figure out what we want to go with from there. We're big proponents of cast film. Cast is just going to be the most dimensionally stable over the long term, looking good for a long term. So I have no problem using a cast film on walls. The little bit of outlay in the beginning will pay dividends in the long run, from my experience. Obviously, from there, laminations, you choose what you want. You know, most of the time we're going with a matte lamination or a luster. Every once in a while, we'll have a situation where they really want to be able to clean it. They want that gloss look, whatever it might be. We'll go gloss. The non-laminated films are something that you wouldn't typically laminate. Obviously, any of the design series that have textures to it. But even 2611 is more for short-term or residential uses for us. So we don't really put that into a commercial setting for long-term where people can get at it. Because regardless, in a commercial setting, it's going to get washed down. It's going to get wiped down, bumped into, whatever it might be. So that's kind of where we start with that. And then obviously you can expand greatly with different laminations, different, whatever we need from there. High tack is something that we do use occasionally. What he was saying, we run into this in the Southwest a lot. I feel like every job we do in Arizona is like a stucco wall, essentially. So sometimes high tack was just the right move. We did some 1405 for a while on it, but high tack wound up being a better fit after everything.
What do you do in schools? I get calls about schools and having issues with vinyl adhering there. I'm assuming it's because low VOC paints.
Most likely. I mean, we run into that at schools with the low VOC thing. We typically will just recommend with it being in a school, just as permanent as of an adhesive as you can get for it. Just due to the fact that kids are kids, for one, and then hands on the walls, running into things, not much care for what's around them. And at the end of the day, they want it to stick. They don't want to have to redo it. They're on budgets, and they don't want to have to worry about in 6 months having to redo a wall mural because it's starting to peel off the wall.
Yeah, I feel the same way on schools. I don't do many schools out of New York. Most of my stuff is obviously in New York and a lot in New York City. And these are older pre-war buildings. They're kind of concrete walls. They're not cinder block, but they're kind of poured for the first 6 feet or so, 5 feet. And then it goes from sheetrock or plaster from there on up. These are not level 5 spackle jobs in these places. This is the maintenance guy filling in a hole. A lot of texture to them. So high tack has certainly been done. We did a project actually with Avery. It was all 1105 that went in there, and it was stunning. I mean, the 1105 and 1106 are probably go-tos for a lot of it for me, just for the flexibility. I can get around texture. If it's a flat wall, fine. But if there's some texture, we run into something we didn't expect, that's fine too. We could deal with that type of film.
So you talk about being surprised, or not knowing there's texture. So are you able to go on site to actually see the surface, or have you showed up once with, one film and then realize you've got to circle back and do it over? Are you doing on-site inspections where you can test the wall for adhesion?
Yeah, we make it part of our standard procedure to do site surveys. And if it's somewhere where we can't get to, then the customer's signing off on it, waiving the right to a site survey. We'll send out a list of questions to them to hopefully get the right answers back so that we can make the right determinations on things. But a lot of that comes back with you've signed off on not having a site survey, so we're going to recommend the best thing that we can do based upon this questionnaire. If it isn't the right setup for it, or something changes in the situation when we get on site for the install, then it's the customer's deal to handle at that point, not ours. It's a hard pill to swallow, but that's also a safety net for us that gets us on site to look at the wall so that there are no surprises at the end of the day. You throw that in front of a customer, and a lot of times they're like, whoa, what do you mean? And then they're like, well, this is the reason why we come out here to do these things. And then they're like, okay, that makes sense.
Did we lose? I think we lost Chris.
I think Chris froze up, and then he
Okay.
Back.
So
Well, kind of speaking of the testing ahead of time, we try and emphasize that from an Avery side, and we actually worked with Justin Pate and created a video it's on our YouTube page, and I think Grant has a link to it in our trade show booth for this show. And it's the wall install protocol, and it shows taking samples of the various films that you would want to use. So once you know your durability, you might use a test of permanent and removable with the finishes that you want and put that up for 24 hours, and then test the removal of it to see how it's adhering, and then that will help you kind of choose your final, make your final selection for film. Is that?
Yeah, the testing is super important. I know that there's a lot of people that think that the test, and Grant and I have talked about this in length, time and again with a lot of these tests too, of people throw it up on the wall, leave it for 15 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes or whatever, and peel it down and go, yeah, it's stuck great. And you're like, well, that's not enough time for it to cure and give it, some of the grab. And plus that's not a good window. We try to do 24 hours is the key. A lot of times we'll get clients that don't care. So the 24 hours works great. We're like, we're going to stick this in a corner, leave it there overnight. We'll be back tomorrow around this time, peel it off, see what happens. Sometimes we get customers that push back on it, but at those times, we'll say, leave this up, have it sit up till however long we can get it up there until the clients said they've had enough of it being on the wall. And then we'll ask them to remove it, flip it over, send a picture of us to us of what the back of the film looks like, and then also the wall of where that was at, so that we can kind of get an idea. And it's not the safest and best thing to do, but it's better than walking out there with a full mural, trying to stick it up and it falling down.
Yeah, main reason you really want to have it up there for 24 hours is, especially the low zero VOC paints, they outgas. I mean, that's one of the main reasons that causes murals not to adhere very well to those paints. So by having up there for 24 hours, you're going to get that outgassing. So if you're getting bubbles in the sample, things like that, that's that will let you know that maybe the paint isn't cured enough for a wall wrap.
And we do a kind of like some weird tests on site to just see the durability of the paint to begin with. We'll scratch at it. We'll, stick our fingernails into it to see how soft it is and stuff too. I mean, you can kind of tell how soft the paint is if you can get a corner of it and pull on it a little bit. If it starts to peel off like a piece of skin, then it definitely hasn't been on there long enough or hasn't cured long enough or hardened for something to really stick to it to feel safe. But 9 times out of 10, with the 24-hour tests, you start to see some of those things right away that you can grasp at. If it starts to outgas and you get a bubble under it, you'll know right away that it's definitely not long enough. And typically if we see something like that, we just tell people that we have to extend the timeline, and we'll give it 3 or 4 days. Okay. And then we'll come out and do another test. We won't give it, we won't do the 24-hour test and then come out, oh, it bubbled, we'll give it 3 days and then plan to come back out and stick the mural. We're going to go, no, we're going to do another test. It's got to sit for 24 more hours, see where that's at. And then, hopefully that second test will show less of, or it's, perfect for what we need to get it done. Then at that point we can go in and do it.
You make some really good points there, Wes, because, one of the things that I run into as a tech rep is somebody will tell me, something didn't seem right, but they still installed. And you stepping up and saying, no, this paint isn't cured properly, or it's not fully cured, we need to wait. I'm sure it's hard, but do they end up, how does the customer take that? I mean, they understand, and
it's a hit or miss pot. I mean, every now and then you get somebody who is pushing back and saying, no, we need to have it done. And then at that point you're like, okay, if you guys need it done that bad, we'll make them sign off on it, saying that, we came in, we tested. Our response to the test was that we wanted to wait a couple more days and do one, but client wants to move forward. They've signed off on that. They're taking full responsibility for it after that point. And then if in a case like that, where that does happen, we do a little bit of extra site prep stuff for us, just to make sure that we can kind of give it the best shot without making the customer feel like that they put themselves in a bad position. We want to exude that we are the experts for a reason, and we are being, good on the customer service side of it by trying to give them the best opportunity to be successful. So, Chris, I know uses an edge tape that's, a pretty high tech adhesive that is a great idea. We silicone the top edges and the corners to keep things from coming down. So if that's a little bit of extra in what we have to do, and they've signed off on not going through with that second round of testing, then, we'll give it the best shot. But, sometimes it comes back. There's a lot of times over the customers, like, if you're not recommending it, then we'll wait. So it really just depends on, one, their need, but two, how we approach it is the biggest part of that. If we're coming to them and saying that we don't want to put you in this position, this is what our recommendation is, this is what our manufacturer is gonna warranty in this situation as well, and you use those few things, that those seem to help. You throw in a warranty situation, or you throw in the fact that a recommendation from an expert level on something like that, then people tend to listen a little bit more. But every now and then you'll get the pushback, and at that point we just try to do the best we can to help them out.
So I got a question here. What is the best life expectancy of an outdoor wall graphic, wall mural? And what would you tend to use on that?
What's the surface?
Let's say it's an outdoor unpainted brick wall.
I would go a year on it. That's a safe number. I don't ever guarantee anything over that unless we've really vetted it out. There's quite a few different things to use for exterior wraps that are high textured. We found out that the 1106 works great for some of that stuff. We've done it on some brick, and just did some R&D with it for ourselves. I had a couple of customers do some smaller things that we've used it on. That works great. We print latex here, so there's some of those films that, like the Illumographics and stuff like that have, you don't have to laminate, that are more of just that, using that aluminum shaped material that you can just roll into the wall. That works too, but as far as I go, I won't go for anything longer than a year.
For us, it depends the exposure. So if you have a southern exposure, northern exposure, it's going to be a big difference on that. As far as the warranty period, or I don't even want to say warranty, because it's a really difficult product to warranty in general. But life expectancy, a realistic life expectancy to give to the client. And then as far as the film, there's a bunch of different products out there. You really got to figure out what's going to work best, and really try it on that particular substrate. This is not something where one product fits all. We've had different manufacturers and different brands. Some work better than others in one situation, and an exact opposite in another area of town. So I definitely would not attempt to just say one product fits all on that, or what works best. There's been 3 or 4 outdoor products that we've used that work individually in their own places.
Kind of all comes back to testing ahead of time again.
That's a big one. I hate doing that outdoor stuff, unless it's like event work where it's going to come down and fairly soon. I don't mind doing texture, brick walls, cinder block walls, but I prefer them to be inside whenever possible.
Yeah, external walls are always a crapshoot. It's not my favorite thing to even offer up when it comes down to it, unless it is an event. Events are prime for that, because it's sometimes is an easy up and down. But anything that's going to stay up for an extended period of time, it's a test. And then it's just, what's the, like what Chris was saying, what's your exposure? How long is it going to be up here? Where's it going to be at? What time of year are we putting it up, and what are we expecting for it to be exposed to over the next 3 to 6 months?
I will say, from an event standpoint and a temporary standpoint, where something's lasting a week or 2 weeks or even a month, like a pop-up shop type of thing for exterior, we have used Avery 2903 with great success on it. And obviously you think about that and you're like, I would never use that on a textured wall, but I guess the tack of it has held up pretty well. Obviously you're not getting into every nook and cranny, but you can roll it down pretty good where it adheres to probably 70% of the surface, and it lasts pretty well. And I actually prefer that over some other products for the temporary stuff. It's worked out really well.
So I think a lot of it comes down to asking a lot of questions and testing before you do it, setting the proper expectations with your customers. Is there any other words of wisdom from you guys that, are doing this every day?
The one thing I will say related to wall wraps in general, I said this to somebody a long time ago, a wall is going to be the easiest bumper you will ever wrap. So there's a lot of margin
That's
in
a
there.
good one.
Most times you're getting more per square foot on a wall than you will on a vehicle. So think about what you'd rather, would you rather do 300 square foot of a wall and be home for lunch, or would you rather be struggling at 8 p.m. with a client outside waiting? So walls have a lot to offer as far as revenue and, more importantly, profit margin and overall reliability, and they're fantastic to do. And going after it is certainly a prime concern of ours, and we continue to try to grow that part of the business. But it's a really great thing. You have to have some skill for it to do it right, and know how to get out of a bad situation, most importantly. But it would be silly not to pursue more and more walls. There's only so many vehicles to wrap. There's only so many walls to wrap. But I will take a wall 10 times out of 10 over a vehicle.
And I think one other thing to keep in mind too, just like with vehicles, we always tend to think of full wraps, but there's also partials. There, you can do a graphic on a wall versus a full coverage wrap, and that may be more appropriate for your customer and be just as impactful.
Yeah, it's all based upon the need at the end of the day. The big thing too is just on the side of working with the manufacturers, get involved, get to know what the products they've got, what the versatility is of them, and take your time. Walls are easy to wrap, yes, but if you skip steps and you try to shortcut it and do whatever you can to just get it done, that's where you start to see things happen that go wrong real quick.
Okay. Grant, do you have any other questions that you can think of, or?
Well, I think that was a great discussion. I would like to invite everybody on this session over to the Avery Dennison booth. We have a fantastic video from Justin Pate that goes into wall film protocol, so all the testing, different materials from Avery Dennison to use, and I'll be there to answer questions for the next 2 hours starting in 30 minutes. So feel free to join me there. I really appreciate Wes and Chris and Clinton, Michelle, Molly, of course, joining us here. It's very informative. I always learn something new when we're talking about walls. Everybody's got their own way of doing it, and you two are obviously very successful at this, so your insight is extremely valued.
Thanks for having us on.